It's pretty static. I have a tripod if you want.
Oh, do you? Well, I think it's working okay. And we tested with Dave to make sure it wasn't like taking funny pictures. That could be pretty bad. Of course, you know, I've been so busy with stuff that I haven't had a time to put it all out on the internet, but I've been downloading it and parsing it. The problem is I have to cut the files in two to make them fit, you know, because there's a limit on YouTube of 2 megs or 2 gigs. So
Kind of like texting, send me 2 texts with the rest of them.
you know, try to make it small enough to fit. But anyway, hey, we get the lament because I couldn't finish it last week. And anyway, what's a lament on Easter, right? The reason this lament is really important is because it directly follows the Great Hallel. The 136th Psalm is the Great Hallel, and the 37th Psalm follows directly after it, and it's a lament. Now, the other thing about this lament is it's expurgated from our hymnal. I told you that, well, what's most intriguing to you? The ones that we put in our hymnal or the ones we don't? Makes me wonder, right? So I intentionally picked 2, and the next one we'll do is the praise, which is the 144th Psalm, which, by the way, is my psalm, because, you know, you're supposed to pick, right? They do that in confirmation class, right? You pick a psalm or you pick a verse that's you memorize, and you sometimes put it on your banner or whatever. That's the psalm that you, or the verse you use. Well, the 144th Psalm is the one I picked, kind of live my life by. But we'll do that one. And that's also expurgated from our hymnal. So, yeah, you might wonder, right? What's with that, over? But,
Send it a message, Lionel.
send it a message. But, you know, obviously the 137th Psalm is important because it directly follows the Great Hallel. You'd think, right? Yeah. Anyway, the words
Except
today...
we said that a long time ago the order had no significance, so now why does it have significance?
No, I never said the order doesn't have significance. What I said is the order doesn't necessarily mean that it's historically in a historical order. We assume that, for example, the first psalm is the earliest written and the 150th is the latest written, or even the 155th if you're Orthodox, right? But the truth is that's not necessarily true. The first does happen to be a really early psalm, and the 150th does happen to be a pretty late psalm, but the order is not necessarily historical. However, you know, what did we see with the Hallel? Remember the Hallel? Before the Great Hallel, the Hallel was the 113th to the 118th. Well, Shazam! You got the Hallel stacked up one after another, right? And remember how I told you the 117th is probably, remember the 118th doesn't start with Hallel, but the 117th does. And I told you that it was probably an add so that they could say the Hallel for the 100. In other words, if you want to do Hallelujah, Hallel to Yah, you could do that by adding the 117th to the 118th, which implies what about the order of the Psalms? What's that?
They're important.
But what about that order? What's the point of the order?
They have a purpose, they have a...
Well, what's the purpose? If the 113th to the 118th are psalms that are done in sequence during the Hallel,
They follow the liturgical in some manner.
what'd you say?
For worship?
For worship, yeah. So when they put together the order of the Hallel, and the order was put together when? I want to draw a timeline anyway. Let's see, what color? Maybe green. I want to draw a timeline anyway because it's really important to this lesson, to this psalm. So if we have a timeline, and we know, let's see, when's the last 432 or so? That's 430, let's say, circa. That's the last book, right, Malachi. And so we know the Psalms were written, well, I'll assert that the Psalms are written. We haven't proof text all those, but I don't think we'll find any that were written past that, although there are some what do you call it, historical revisionists that want to put the Psalms in a later period, but that's probably silly. Because we know they were already together by the time the Septuagint, matter of fact, before the Septuagint was put together, we know that all the Psalms existed, but the Septuagint made them the what? Psalmoi. He even named them. So we're guessing, we can guess, right? That we saw that some of the Psalms look like they're written in the very early period. So the Psalms written, you know, now and there, right? All over the place. And somebody collected them together, quite appropriately, at some point between now and then, and gave them the Greek, this is Greek, name Psalmoi, before they got into the Septuagint. Because in the Septuagint, the Greek translation, right, now we've got Psalms labeled as Psalmoi, and they're in their order. So what is obvious in this is at some point they took the order that was probably used in worship anyway, and they put the Psalms in that order.
Is the Septuagint, is that like 200 something? What is?
Yeah, about 250 to 200 BC. That was when it was translated. That doesn't mean that there wasn't stuff going on before then, right? And all the subscriptions to the Psalms, the stuff, you know, Psalm of David, you know, Psalm about of what, right? Or Moses, those are all added, right? We know they're added because we have earlier documents to show that they weren't. They're all added basically prior to the translation. And they're Talmudic probably sources. So the order is important, is important in Jewish worship today as an order of the Psalms. And by the way, it's important to us too, because we use the Psalms in liturgical practice, right? And theoretically, if you go back and look at the Psalm things, I don't think we quite follow the 1, 2, 3, but it's not that far off. You know, we don't necessarily, we skip around a little bit, but not a lot. The reason we skip around is why?
Our calendar is every third year we do this. I mean, we don't do the entire thing each year.
Well, we try to fit historically. Historically, the church, you know, the original calendar of the readings of the church started really early. You know that, right? Really early. And so when they put the calendar together of the readings, they tried to fit the Psalm, the Old Testament, the Epistle, and the New Testament so that they supported one another. See? And that's intentional. And so we do a little skipping because they support one another. Now there's something I didn't look at, maybe I should look at it next week, is how close is the order, you know, of, for example, the prayer book or the, you know, the calendar of the readings to the Psalms order. Because if you find really close concurrence with Hebraic readings, what does that mean?
Very strong Jewish influence.
Yeah, Teen Hodos influence. Of course, we know there's a Teen Hodos influence in the church calendar, right? Completely. So, yeah, makes sense, right? But anyway, the 137th Psalm, let's look at it. Oh, let me get the words of the day. These are the same words of the day we had last week because they're really important words of the day. They're really important to both the 137th, and we'll see them in the 144th Psalm, because these are late date words. Shahir means, okay, remember, Psalmoi does not exist, but that is in Hebrew. Psalmoi means to sing a song with a lyre. So Psalms are intended, at least from the Septuagint period, to have music. They're probably catatonic. Anatonic? Well, there's anatonic means you're on I think on a single note. Catatonic means you're on a single note. Not catatonic like catatonic, right? But there's F on okay, I'm not a music guy, okay, but anyway.
Cantor.
There's the cantored originally was on a single note. So somebody gave me a note. And then we went to aphonic, which means you change at a point, like we kind of do our psalms. And then there is singing, what we call singing, where you change, typically every syllable changes a note or sets a note. That's the way normal singing is, right? But,
What's normal?
well, whatever. It took us a long time to get there, right? I mean, our original prodigies, right, of music were like, na, 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 na. And they said, well, that's kind of boring, so we'll go na, 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 na. And that was a little better. And now we go na, 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 na. And so, you know, we've got the na-nas down. But remember, you know, people weren't doing 4-part harmony. They weren't even doing 1-part harmony. They weren't even doing multiple harmony, because harmony had to be invented. And that was like, harmony was way late. You know, we're talking thousands, 1100s, 1400s. Anyway, shir is really an important word because it means to sing a song like a bard. To sing a song like a bard, or a bardic song. And you know, I talked about this last week. Some of you guys weren't here. But the reason that's important is because bards, where do you find bards?
It was an Irish drinking song.
An Irish drinking song is a bard? Skjold in, let's see, the Anglo-Saxons are skjolds, and bards are Norman. And almost all cultures that are what have bards and skalds and those guys. What do you gotta have? Gotta be literate, gotta have music, gotta have bars, right? Which implies what?
Civilization.
Civilization, well, agricultural civilization, because you have bars, you gotta have beer and wine, right? See? So, when you move into this era, I mean, this is the era, this is that big, this is really important era, because you start to see skalds and bards, you don't have skalds and bards hanging around with, generally hunters and nomadic kind of groups. Really, when you start getting skalds and bards, you're post-literate, generally post-literate, although there's argument about that in history, prehistory guys. But generally, you know, for example, one of the most famous guys who wrote down the previous skalds and bards stuff, the Greek dude. Remember? Remember Odyssey and the Iliad? Right? Those were supposedly the myths and what the bards had sung that were written down. And this is a big argument in history. Did skalds and bards come from pre-literate or are they only literate? We know they pretty much have to be in an agricultural established culture. So what does it indicate when you have skalds and bards? Generally, just period. It's civilization. So civilization's moving on. You don't find this word in early Hebrew. You don't find this word in early Psalms. You find it late. Rosh is that word that I tried to explain last week, and I still don't know if my brain's clear enough to give it to you properly, but Rosh means to shake the head. And it's in the sense of a leader shaking the head. And this is where the opposite of English or opposite of the Western culture and the Eastern culture comes in. Because in our culture, to us, yes is this. In their culture, yes is this. So Rosh means to shake the head, and it means a positive affirmation. And when a person that's in that culture does this, that's a no, because it's opposite to Western culture. In other words, Yachal is a foundation. And we see this word. There's also another word that can be used for foundation. But remember when we had the 118th Psalm and the word capstone is used? Capstone, which is only found in Roman architecture. You find keystones in Greek architecture. And so I mentioned a pyramid capstone, but that's not really what they mean. What they mean is the stone that fits an arch together. And if you pull that stone out, what happens to the arch? Falls down. Cornerstone is a modern idea. You don't need a cornerstone. However, we're going to see in the 144th Psalm, I think, a really interesting concept, which is the primary pillar, which is from Greek architecture, by the way. So anyway, I won't go back through that. I want to get to the 137th Psalm. Specifically, I got to find where I start. Does anybody have a subscription for this psalm?
Experience of captivity,
What's that?
experience of captivity.
Well, I think that's
I just read what you asked,
Is there a-
That's what it said.
A person in exile weeps over the bitterness of captivity.
I think that's a, what do you call it, a theme thing, but yeah. I was looking for a subscription like, you know, a Psalm of David, a Psalm of,
Yeah, did you see it?
Anonymous.
Did you read yours?
huh?
I thought there was one that said Psalm of David, a lament or something like that.
Oh, really? Did it say a Psalm of David?
138 does in mine.
Anyway, let's look at this, okay? I'll start out with the first, some of you guys weren't here, and it won't hurt to repeat some of this because this is some really interesting stuff in here. It says, by the Nahar. Nahar is a stream, or, you know, I went through a whole big thing, but I'll just tell you flat out, okay? A small stream of running water in Babylon is an irrigation ditch. Because remember, in Egypt and in Babylon, they were both watered. Babylon is watered by the Tigris and Euphrates, and Egypt is watered by the Nile. They had to have irrigation ditches for agriculture in those areas. And so the word used is Nahar, which means a stream, but also means an irrigation ditch. And so literally, okay, rivers is probably not a good translation. A stream would be better. An irrigation ditch is probably the best. But in any case, it says, by the Nahar, the irrigation ditches literally of Babel. Now Babel in English and in Hebrew has two meanings. Babel means confusion, and Babel also means Babylon. So it says, by the irrigation ditches of confusion, or Babel. Now remember, this is poetry, right? So we expect poetry to have dualistic meanings. And in Hebrew, what do you expect? A lot of euphemism, right? Beautiful euphemism.
Shortage of words.
Well, they do. They have a shortage of words. Words have multiple meanings in it, and you look at within the context. So this word can mean confusion, but it also can mean Babylon. That's what's beautiful about this. There's a whole. This is full of this. Anyway, by the irrigation ditches of confusion or Babylon, we yashab, we settle. Sad is not a good word because it means, yashab means to settle. This is the same word that's used when it talks about in Ruth that what Kilion and Chilion and whatever the guy was, they settled in Moab. So they settled, we settled, yashab. And Gam, together, baka, wept, bemoaned. When we zakar, and what's really important, remember it is not exactly zakar. Zakar means to mark. And if you remember we talked about zakar, zakar means to either write or make a mark. So if you have a zakar, when it says zakar, zakar can be memory in your mind, but obviously zakar can also mean what? What's that? Well, to write it down. Yeah, to write it down. What's important about this is because what are we seeing? It's written down. Yeah, it's written down. We, zakar, we marked Zion. Of course, we say Zion, Zion. Zion means the conspicuous barren place. You say, well, what's that? The conspicuous barren place. If you look at the city of Jerusalem, green, maybe blue. If you look at the city of Jerusalem, you have the temple. Temple's not built yet, okay? And you have the Tower of Antonia. And then you have the city of David, which was originally, it's got a funny shape, but anyway, it was originally walled. And the pool of Shiloach over here. And what was characteristic of the city of David? The first place that they walled. Why do you wall a place?
Defend it.
And where do you want to build your walled place?
High.
High up. And what's the biggest problem with having it high up?
Water.
No water. So by the way, Hezekiah built the pool of Shiloach, right? When they walled the rest of the city. That was the reason that he built his thing to give water to Jerusalem. And by the way, they couldn't get water into the Ophel. This is called the Ophel until that time. But anyway, the barren place is here. And this is where they built the walled city. And so Zion literally means a conspicuous barren place, because if, you know, here's the hill, here's the Mount of Olives, but all around this is open plain. And so when you look, if you probably looked before they built the city there, what could you see? The hill that was where David built his city of Jerusalem. But it's called Zion, the conspicuous. Now, did anybody see satire here? There's some deep satire here. They're sitting by irrigation ditches. That means obviously what?
Water.
Gardens and agriculture and
Milk and honey.
things growing.
Yeah, and we're going to see this in the second one. It's beautiful stuff, right? Green. And they're comparing it to the barren place, okay? Now, you got to catch this satire. Satire also indicates what? Cultural advance. Cultural advance. They're never as satirical or paradoxical as the Greeks, but this is getting pretty close. As a matter of fact, all the late Psalms are like this. Look at this. This is beautiful on 2. They're in the midst, Tavak. They're in the midst. It's not on. They're in the midst, and it's not poplars. It's Arab. It's willows. They're in the midst of the willows. Can you see this? What's the midst of the willows? They're sitting in a grove of trees. They're in a grove of trees. And by the way, if you know anything about ancient cultures, what do they do with trees? Worship trees. Yeah. Remember, the sylphs and dryads and all that stuff in Greek literature were in the trees. And so expect every pagan culture and every, animistic culture to worship trees or whatever. So the fact that they're mentioning trees and specific kinds of trees, willow trees in our culture, in all cultures, represent, well, they're around water, but what do they represent? Willow trees. Sadness, weeping. Come on, you guys. This is like, look, if I wrote a poem in English and said I was playing my harp under the willows, you'd go, oh! You wouldn't go, oh, he's so happy, right? That's why it's really terrible for them to translate this as poplars. Because around poplars, what do you? Oh, poplars. Remember like the dryads. Look at the. Okay, if you find pictures of dryads around poplars, you got to be careful what you look for on the internet because you never know what you might find. But if you could find the pictures or whatever of dryads, poplar dryads, what do you think they look like? Happy, dancing, smiling. If you look at willow dryads, what do you think they look like? Mournful, probably playing their harps, right? So anyway, they're in the midst of the willow. And also, here's one of those words. Because Arab also means the marketplace or the exchange. The marketplace or the exchange. So in the midst of either the willows or the marketplace. Okay, this is that euphemistic thing. Look what it says. It says we hung. That's not what it says in the Hebrew. You guys know the difference between hanged and hung? What's the difference?
One you do yourself and one is done to you.
Yeah, that's basically, you hang a picture. You have hung a picture, right? But you are hanged by the neck until you're dead. Right? One is the transitive and one is the intransitive case of the verb. I know we hate talking about these things, but this is English as well as other languages. It ain't hung, it's hanged. It says we hanged, literally, to gibbet. Gibbet, what's gibbet? When you hang a person, we hanged, we gibbeted our kinova, our literally to twang, our harps or our actions. Now look at this. You would hang or have hung a harp, right? Because it's a thing. But when you are hanged, you are putting emotional or physical, human being, right? So look at the dual use words. Harp, kanoar, means to twang a harp, or it means action. So what's the implication here? We hung up our actions. You can also read this, that, okay, you can read this two ways. In the midst of the willows, we put up our harps, we hung up our harps. You can also say, in the midst of the marketplace, we placed our harps. Why would you put harps up in a marketplace? To sell them. To sell them. Why would you hang your actions? That would indicate what? You would not do them. You would control yourself.
You may be unable to express the action,
Yeah,
activity.
that may be true because what we're going to see in the next one really fits that. Just, the complexity of the word usage. We don't get it at all in English because English does not have, this is the problem of translating, for example, poetry, translating great literature into English or any other one, any language. If somebody's written something great in English with dual usage, how hard is that to translate into another language and get that dual usage? Almost impossible. Same thing's true of other languages. And so when a translator is picking and choosing, it really depends on how he's picking and choosing what he's going to translate. And the other problem is this. Remember I told you, what do people translate for what reasons? To put out their ideas or their theology or their doctrinal things. That's why it's really neat to look at the actual word use and see what it means in the specific Hebrew, in the Hebrew. So, in 3, for there, it says our captors, but literally the word is shabbat, transported into captivity. Literally those who transported us into captivity. Asked, it's literally shal, they inquired. They inquired us for dabar, and it's not songs, it's dabar. Literally, a dabar is an arrangement of words. So what did they ask him for? Poetry. They asked him for poetry. And, okay, here's a great one for you. What does it imply if your captors are asking you for poetry?
Entertainment.
Well, they don't have it as good as yours, and you already have it, right? The implication is that there are these songs, and they are entertaining in Aramaic or in the Persian language, or they like to hear them. They're lyrical, they sound, you see what I'm saying? So there's an implication that they're here. Now, this could also mean that they have Aramaic psalms we don't know about, or a lot of stuff, poetry we don't know about. It goes on, it says, our tormentors, and literally it's not, it means tormentors, but it's those who caused us to howl. Literally in Hebrew. Those who caused us to howl. You can torment in lots of ways. Demanded is added. Songs of is added. The next word that is not added is shemacha, which means glee. It also means a religious festival. It means a religious festival. What is going on here? Remember I told you, why are we in the midst of the willows? Why are we by the irrigation ditches of Babylon? What's going on?
We've been carried away in captivity.
Yeah, but what's going on right now? A festival. It's a religious festival. This is what this psalm is about. Period. Done. A religious festival. Literally, that's why the writer used the word shemacha, which means glee. It also means a religious festival. We're going to see another word. They said is added. Literally it says shayir. Shayir. Sing like a bard. Sing like a bard. One of is added. Sing like a bard, shayir. So this word as a noun. So it's used as a verb and it's used as a noun. Shayir, shayir. Of Sion. The conspicuous barren place. Okay, so get this. They're in a religious festival. All this festival stuff is going on. They're in the midst of the willows with irrigation ditches and beautiful greenery in the garden. Remember, what was Babylon famous for? The hanging gardens, right? So they're amidst of all this beautiful place, and they're asked to sing a song of the conspicuous barren place. They're asking to sing what kind of song? A lament. And that's what we have here, is a lament. This may be the song they're singing, but not really, because maybe they added to it. We'll see in a minute what I'm talking about. Goes on to say, let's see, I think I had a, here's my translation of this. And, you know, like I said, there's some dual use words here, but literally, in the market, the groves of willows, those who transported us into captivity inquired an arrangement of words, poems. The harps were hanged, remember? So they couldn't sing to harps because they had put up their harps in the marketplace for sale or, you know, whatever. Those who caused us to howl as opposed to sing. Those who caused us to howl as opposed to singing were full of glee. They had a religious festival. Sing like a bard, a singing of the barren place Zion.
Belittling them.
What's that?
They're belittling them.
They are belittling them. You know, they could be belittling them. It depends. It depends on if they've developed sarcasm in their culture. Because they may not. They may not even understand. You know, think about it this way. If you're let's say that you have servants, you're Victorian English, or let's say you're a slave owner and you ask your slaves to sing. Right? What are you looking for? A good time.
Maybe not. Maybe your back to his belittling, maybe
Yeah.
by exposing their culture, it makes you feel better because look where you are and look where their culture took them.
I don't disagree. However, you don't ask the culturally illiterate to sing or do poems. But I don't disagree. I'm just saying that, you know, there's lots of, you know, yeah, you'll get, for example, you know, we know it. You'll get the evil Victorian era guy that asks his butler to sing him a song, right? You know, about how happy he is that he's rich, to make fun of him. But then you also get, you know, the dumb guy that just says, sing me a song, right? And probably there's 90% of them are just the dumb guys. They're not making fun of their servants, right? Not generally. I mean, we like to have that image, but that's not the way people are. You might ask your employee to do something, you know, that would really, without knowing their circumstance, it might make them sad, right? Totally accidentally. Hopefully you don't do it on purpose. I mean, we know there are people like that. But you see, I mean, it really depends on what shoe you're looking at here. And, you know, what side you are on. And so...
But didn't the Babylonians look at the Jewish people as less than, I don't know, less than human, but I mean that their conquest demonstrated that their culture and their gods were superior to the Israelites.
Of course it does. Don't we all believe that? Right? I mean, that's the assumption. That's why everybody became Greek. That's why Hellenization took place across the world, is because the assumption of what?
God's always on my side.
The Greek gods and spirit culture. And in the case of Greeks, it was really true. In the case of the Hebrews, what did the Babylonians and the Persians, what did the Persians, let's see, the Babylonians at first and then the Persians later, what did they do with their Jewish captives? Where did they put them?
They allow them to have separate communities.
Well, no, they put them in the high places of government. Remember Daniel?
Yeah.
Remember Ezekiel, Nehemiah, and
He was up there and.
right? Yeah, they put them in high places. How about Esther? How about what Esther and what was Haman? Mordecai. Mordecai.
He didn't know
Haman was
Esther
back.
was Jewish,
She became a queen.
But when she revealed that she was, he wasn't mad about it. He was mad that she was gonna kill.
Yeah. So the Babylonians and the Persians held the Jews in really high esteem. That's why you'd ask them to do a poem or sing you a song, like a bard, right? But yeah, there could be sarcasm. There could be intentional malice. There is obviously opposite intentional malice. We'll see this, okay? This is a question in 4. How can we shayir, sing like a bard, the shayir of Yahweh? Of Yahweh. Okay. It's a religious festival. What are they asking them to sing songs about?
Their own gods, I imagine.
Well, no, they're asking them to sing songs about Yahweh.
That's what she meant, right?
Is that what you meant?
The Israelites God.
Yeah.
Well, I
And she said
that
that
at a religious festival, they'd be wanting to sing about their gods too, but,
Yeah.
and they might, I thought maybe the Israelites would feel so conflict singing, praising Yahweh at a pagan religious festival.
What you're saying is exactly right. You're exactly right. Can you see this picture though? Okay, the fact that we're in a willows, the willows indicate what? They're gods, right? And so they're asking him to sing songs about Jehovah as if Jehovah is just another deity. Yeah. Why would you want them to sing about their God?
Part of the worship.
Well, it's a religious festival. I captured your people, and that means I captured your gods. See? Yeah, and usually, what did you do with the gods? The gods were physical. The problem with the Jewish gods is that God wasn't physical. How is it represented? How is Yahweh represented? By the name. The name is what represents Yahweh. Nothing else. We don't have, there are not other gods in history. There may be, but I don't know of them. I'm sure there is someplace. But in general in history, is there cultures that say, don't say the name of our God? No, most of the time they want you to say the name of their God.
To the lesson today.
What's that?
To the lesson today, they were all Thomases. They wanted to see it.
Yeah, yeah. Show me your God. Because it's usually this thing, carved. In the Old Testament, it's really cool. There's a word for a carved idol and an idol that is made of metal. It's basically been formed from molten. So what you have is this whole thing about your gods. And they've captured this God and they're asking him to tell us poems because to them, how is this God represented? This Yahweh God represented?
Show us his picture, show us his idol, show it whatever.
In words. Yeah, because there's no idol. You can't take that God out. And by the way, this is really neat. You should go, I want to do it. I want to see a kami festival in Japan because in Japan they still do this. They take the deities, they take the kamis from kami is a god, means God in Japanese. They take them out of their shrines. And during religious festivals, they march them around and they do music and they sing and they dance. It's a huge thing in the Japanese religious, in the past religious culture. They're growing out of it. But, it's something they do. And this is what they typically did in Greece. This is what they did in Assyria and in Babylon, and the Persians did it. They had their gods, they kept them in the temple most of the time, and then on the festivals, they put them in a little cart, or they carry them, and they take them through the streets, and they venerate them. You find this all over the place where there's still strong paganism. You find this in
Mardi Gras, New Orleans.
in Mardi Gras, yeah. Kinda-ish, right? How can we sing songs? How can we sing like a bard, bardic songs of Yahweh? Which assumes there are bardic songs of Yahweh, which, by the way, this is one. While in a nakar, a foreign, or literally nakar is really an interesting word. I should give it to you as a word of the day. Nakar means literally those we have to look askance at. Now this is really important because, the idea of a foreign person in Jewish thought. For example, if you see a person and he looks kind of similar to you, are they foreign? How can you tell?
Often by their dress.
By their language? By their dress, maybe? So the word in Hebrew means literally to look at a person, like scrutinize them, to literally scrutinize them. So when you see the word, usually the word foreign or foreigner comes from this nakar, which means you have to scrutinize them. The assumption is they look kind of like you already. Now this is really important, I think, because all these Middle Eastern people looked kind of similar-ish, right? And their dress is kind of similar-ish. So the only way you can tell is by looking for details. And remember, these are pretty closed cultures. Remember, how did they tell the difference between in the judges, between that?
Couldn't pronounce.
They couldn't pronounce the SH, right? Or TH, or whatever, Shibboleth, right? So you had, they weren't foreign, but they had to scrutinize them. to know that they were different. So I think it's an important thought here. While in a Nakar, a land of strangers, literally, Amada, red soil, Adama. Adam means ruddy red color, and Adama means red soil. Adam comes from the name of the soil. 5, if I ignore, it's not forget, it's literally the word is mislay or ignore. If I mislay or ignore you, Jerusalem, may my right hand, my yamen, my literally right hand or right side, forget, shaka, mislay or ignore its skill. Okay, it's skill at what? Skill at singing, skill at playing the harp. Because what did they do with the harps? They had hung them up, right? Which means they're not using them. I don't know if it's because of the religious festival. I don't know if it's because they're selling them in the marketplace so they can have money. I don't know what, the exact connotation here is. But the point is, he's saying, may my right, and right hand, when it says right hand, it doesn't literally mean, it means your right side. It means your skill, your abilities. May you ignore your abilities. And, oh, Jerusalem. So we went from Zion, which is the barren place, to Jerusalem, the city. And by the way, in Jerusalem at this time is the temple. So when I said Zion, do I mean the temple? No. When I say Jerusalem, I mean the temple. So literally, what is Zion? What is the barren place? The barren place indicates the political identity, where Jerusalem indicates the what?
Jerusalem.
The spiritual and political. Most of the spiritual. Because remember, the city of David did not include the temple. The temple was outside the city of David. 6. There's some really interesting stuff in here. May my tongue, okay, I've hung up my harp, so my hand is not going to forget, right? Now, can you picture this? What is he doing with his hand as he's singing? What is the bard doing with his hand? Right, he's playing even though he doesn't have an instrument.
Air harp.
Air harping. Air harping. Yeah, yeah. Just, I want you to see his picture. This psalm is giving you a picture of what's going on. See? And, in a culture like this, do you think, we think of air guitar, right? And we think of, what's his name? Who did the famous air guitar scene? Tom Cruise. When Tom Cruise did the famous air guitar scene? Ferris Bueller. Anyway, there's the, air guitar. To us is a funny thing because we always think of it as a funny joke, right? But they're actually air guitar contests, right? But in a culture like this, what do you think a bard, what would it indicate for a bard to be using his hand to do harping while he's doing poetry?
With the rhythm.
He'd be with the rhythm, but they would see that as a refined thing. You know what I'm saying? Because it would be an indication of what to the gods? It's a method of praise to the gods. Just look at ancient other cultures. How do a lot of cultures praise God through their motions? In Bali, they have the different types of worship, things. In the luau, the stuff from the isles, from the Hawaiian Islands, or from all those islands. A lot of those welcoming dancing, that comes out of their culture. It's not like something that's modern, although it's great for tourists, right? But all of that comes from the cultural aspects, and most of it's it's all cultural from their religion. It all comes out of religion. All that stuff comes out of religion. Matter of fact, where does all our music come from? Western music. Religion. Until the modern era, right? All that's religious. Beethoven, Bach, Vivaldi, all that. May my tongue, my lashon, literally, may my tongue, the instrument and literally this is tongue. May my instrument, the instrument for licking and eating and speech. Literally, it's the instrument for licking, eating, and speech. Cling, the bach, literally means catch by pursuit or impinge to the check inside my mouth. May it stick inside my mouth. If I do not zakar, mark you. If I do not Allah, ascend Jerusalem, my Rosh, give an affirmation as lead to joy. And literally it means simcha, that's a religious festival. So, okay, let's look at this a little bit. In other words, this is kind of complex because it's saying two things. Number one, they asked him to sing, but they had done what? They'd hung up their harps. Now they're asking him to sing, and he says, my tongue has stuck claved to the top of my mouth. So he is going to zakar, which means he's going to do what? Write it down. He's going to write it down. Zakar. And then it says, if I do not consider, and you know that it's really the if is kind of literally it's just ascend Jerusalem, and the Rosh. Basically, it's a Rosh, so it's an affirmation of the shake of the head. The leader is giving an affirmation of the shake of the head to what? What is he affirming? What is he giving a shake of the head in affirmation to? To the religious festival. What is he not going to forget during this religious festival?
His religion.
Zion, right. Jerusalem and Yahweh.
There is only one God.
He's, you know, this is very interesting the way he's going about this because this is a pretty complex piece of literature. You know, I've hung up my harp, it's clung to the roof of my mouth. I can write it down. Now, because he gave an affirmation, what are they obviously doing? Singing, praising Yahweh, singing songs to Zion. This goes, you know, do you remember when, let's see, what was it? What did I teach? I taught the New Testament book, was it Galatians or Ephesians? Which one was the last one I taught, New Testament book? Do you remember? Ephesians. Do you remember Ephesians? Paul had never been to Ephesus, right? And the thing is that when Paul had not been to Ephesus, what he had said specifically to them was, did he tell them to not participate in the Mysterion festivals? What did he tell them to do? He told them to participate in the Mysterion festivals, but remember what? The Lord God, and not worship their deity. Do you remember that? That's what Paul wrote to the Ephesians. Paul told the Ephesians, you can participate all you want in the Mysterion worship and the worship of the Greeks. Just don't do what? Forget God and Christ. Don't worship them. Do you see this as a similar type thing here?
Look at Daniel, don't bow down.
Very similar. Very similar. Now, we're going to see something else in here. It's very interesting, but that's okay. And I kind of translated this. May my tongue, the instrument for licking, eating, speech, impinge, catch by pursuit, stick because of singing. Or also you could catch because of emotion. Inside my mouth, if I don't mark you, if I don't ascend Jerusalem and give affirmation as a leader in the religious festival. So basically, I'm acceding to this religious festival. 7, mark. The word is, they say, remember, but it's a car. Mark. Mark Yahweh, what the Edomites, and literally it's Ben Edom, the sons of Edom, did on the day, the Yom, the period of time, did on the period of time when Jerusalem fell as added. Literally it says, it just gives a quote. Tear down Arah to be bare, demolish, they cried. They amar, they commanded. Arah, demolish. Yechod, to the foundation. In other words, tear it down. What do you think they want to tear down? The temple, yeah, the temple. So the Edomites had told them, had cried, and here we get a piece of historical information that we didn't have from any other source. The Edomites were basically aiding the Babylonians and were telling the Babylonians, tear down their temple. So remember, the Edomites were the guys that Malachi was really irritated at, and that they would not, and basically, who was a very famous Edomite? Herod the Great was an Edomite. And so was Herod and all his sons and all those other guys. So they were all Edomites.
Come from Edom?
What's that?
What about Ruth and Boaz, all that stuff was going on.
That was Moab.
Moab, not Edom.
Yeah,
Okay.
Edom is the one at the south. I know, this stuff gets all complicated, right? But that's okay, that's okay. It lets us remember that, there's lots of people, different types of people around here. But it's interesting that he brings this up, because remember, the first part is all about what? Acquiescent. Now, what kind of acquiescent is that acquiescent? It's protesting acquiescence, right? The guy is, he said, we're hanging our harps, our tongues are cloven to the top of our mouth, but in spite of that, we will sing to Zion, right? And we're not going to sing to your gods, we're going to sing to Zion. And then we have this transition. Zakar. In other words, Zakar means to do what? Mark is in, write it down. And guess what? He just wrote it down for us right here. The Edomites obviously stand in place of what? The Babylonians stand in place of whoever was bad against Israel and Jerusalem, right? That's the point. He's using this as a euphemistic source, pretty much, to say anyone who opposed Jerusalem. That's the point. But then it goes on. In this part, they probably didn't sing to the Babylonians.
You'll do it once.
Yeah, you'll do it once. O Bath, daughter. Literally, it's Bath and Ben. Ben means son of, Bath means daughter of. So Ben Yeshua, or Ben Joseph, Jesus ben Joseph, Yeshua ben Joseph, the son of Joseph. Bath Joseph would be his daughters, the daughter of Joseph. And so the son of, Ben means builder of a family that's male. Bath means builder of a family that's female. But it says daughter of confusion, of Babel. Daughter of confusion. So maybe the Babylonians didn't get this because they didn't know what the word meant, but I wouldn't say this either. Daughter of confusion, doomed to Shaddad, literally, who shall be ravaged. I know we expurgate, we like to expurgate, it means literally, who shall be ravaged. Asher, happy is the man. And basically, Asher is where you say, oh, happy, etc., etc. This is a word that instead, if you wanted to make it glee and be happy, this is a word you would use instead of religious festival. Asher, happy as a man is he who repays. Literally, shalom is safe, is completed for the way you treated us. Gamal, literally the way you treated us. It's payback. So payback. In 9, Asher, happy is the man, he who Asher seizes your infants, OL, your children, and Nephat dashes them to pieces against not rocks, it's Selah, the walls of your fortress. Babylon was famous for the walled city. Yeah, the Babylon was a walled city. It was famous. Unfortunately, they made them out of mud, and when the river was diverted by Darius, it washed away the mud in the walls, and that's how Darius took the city, and the Persians took the Babylonian Empire. But the point here is this is a true lament, and not just a lament. It's a very easy psalm to place. The time is obvious. During when? The Babylonian captivity. It is a satiric construction on confusion and Babylon. By the streams, the irrigation ditches of Babylon, it's organic or sarcastic construction. Literally, their harps, we talked about this. The image of the willows, both weeping and their gods. The tormentor asked, and who were their bards, by the way? Who are the bards of the Hebrew people? Who would have been asked to do this poetry?
Not the priests, right?
The Levites. I know you guys are thinking, the Levites, right? Because the Levites were the guys who did it.
That's their job.
They're being forced to sing in a religious procession by the Babylonians. They remember Zion while they're singing to foreign gods and hope will not lose their skill at music or their voices. And also, there's protesting in here. There's like deep stuff. You can read this many ways. The forcing them may be women priestesses. Remember, Assyrians and Babylonians were famous for women priestesses. So when it talks about daughters of confusion or daughters of Babylon, they may be talking about that. Also, the men of Jerusalem may have been forced to do what with the Babylonian goddesses or Babylonian priestesses? Remember, they had a sex thing going where to worship Ashtoreth, you basically put your daughter in a house of prostitution so that she could stay there for a year and have a child that was dedicated to Baal. And in some, the Philistines basically put the children to death. Some of these religions, they did that. So, yeah, there's some weird stuff going on here. But, the picture might be of being forced to be part of this. The time is obviously Babylonian captivity. The author is likely a Levite, obviously a bard, a male who plays the harp and sings. A place is Babylon outside the walls. I mean, this is pretty obvious. This is a very obvious psalm as to where it was written, when it was written. You can place it almost exactly in time. So, about 350 circa. So anyway, in any case, this is a lament. I think it's really important. You can see why we expurgated it, but the Jews put it right after the Great Hallel. So obviously they used it after the Great Hallel. After the greatness of the Hallel, they probably reminded themselves of the reasons for lament in Jerusalem. In any case, thank you, Father, for your word. We thank you for your psalms. We pray you look after us for this week as you did through yesterday. In your name we pray. Amen.
Final,
Yes, sir.
one of the auxiliary